Hi, this is Debra Danielsen, and I am so excited. We have an in-studio guest today. And guess what we're going to talk about? Oh my gosh. We're going to get crazy and talk about dating, relationships, and love.
Feeling free, I feel alive. Yeah.
And I hope this will make you feel alive. And I think there's nothing more exciting than new love relationships. But if you got an idea of a bad relationship, we're going to help you kick that to the curb and never have that experience again. So keep close attention to what our guest is going to talk about. And speaking of a bad relationship, I just want to remind you, you can go on Amazon, and I have the original copy of the book here, which I don't think is available anymore at all, but the new updated version with extra chapters in it is available. And it's called Vapor by Debra Danielsen. And it's about how I was scammed out of $250,000 on Match.com. Now, today, I am so excited because I'm going to have a dear friend on. He has written one book and it's out and available, but he's working on a second one. And I think, if memory serves me right, and we'll talk more about this, I think his plan was to write maybe a total of 5 books, if I remember right. We talked a lot about this when we worked together at Dex Media. And I am proud to announce and introduce you to my dear friend, Chris Hayes. Chris, welcome to our podcast.
Hi, Deb. Thanks for having me on your show. I appreciate it. I'm excited.
Can you believe we've known each other 10 years?
I know. Isn't that wild? Wow. That's a great memory, but you're spot on. 10 years exactly.
Yeah. And we had to go through Google AdWords certification together and all kinds of media training out in Denver, Colorado during a snowstorm. Yeah. There were snowstorms too, if I recall, right?
Yep. I believe it was end of February, beginning of March, 2013. So
yeah, about this time of the year right now where we're recording. So
yeah,
happy anniversary.
Right?
We're just missing Jonathan. We need Jonathan on here and crack a couple of jokes. So yeah. I think what's going to be interesting about this podcast is that we were both single and going through this training, and we were always talking about dating and relationships and what makes a good relationship, what makes a bad relationship. And let's face it, when you're sitting in a call center all day long, you learn a lot about relationships and how to talk to people. And I think one of the things that made you very successful at that was that while you were talking to people, you always listened very carefully. You've always been a very good listener. And to your credit, I think that you learn a lot by listening. And then what you've written in your book is what to look out for, right?
Right. Yep. Definitely.
So tell us about your journey and why you wanted to write this book and why you think it's different from what else is available out there.
Yeah, definitely. So in a nutshell, my background, better part of 2 decades, reading books on faith, leadership, purpose, positive attitude, design a man, design a woman, relationship books, and personality books too was a big hot button that better part of 2 decades, I read and studied those types of books. But my favorite part of all those categories of books was relationships, design a man, design a woman, and personalities. So especially personalities, that one has always stuck with me. So after reading books for 2 decades and the impact they made on my life personally, as a man, as a single person, and even helping me in relationships, That's really just the only way I could give back to the world. It sounds crazy, but that's just kind of how I looked at it. Was I'm gonna write books one day because they've impacted my life, and I want to have the opportunity to impact other people's lives.
So one of the things that has always struck me, and I don't know if we do this by intuition, but we always think that there's only a certain type of person that we should go for. And so when I was going through my last marriage, which lasted about 23 years,
Mhm.
I knew one thing for sure. I didn't want anything like that ever again. I knew that I had definitely picked the wrong personality. And so I made it my purpose to definitely, because I felt like I couldn't trust my judgment. Like I felt like I was blind. I felt like when I looked at somebody, I was maybe transfixed more with eye candy than with what that person had on the inside. So I
Right?
made a distinct effort to find a dating app called Elite Singles that used a very scientific approach in looking at behavior, personality traits, and telling you how that person was put together pretty much. I know that sounds like a freak show, but I have a very scientific background. So it's like I needed something like that because I honestly didn't know what I was looking at. So do you talk about stuff like that?
So yeah, what you said in the very beginning is just like spot on. So it's spot on kind of what I'm talking about personalities in my book, what I like to open up with. And that's, sometimes you got to learn what you don't want
Yeah.
to know what you want later. But at least you were, I don't want to say smart enough, but like, at least you acknowledge that. And you're like, well, I know what I don't want. Because sometimes, one thing I think is interesting, doesn't have a lot to do with personalities, but sometimes what we first fell in love with,
Mhm.
some people out there will just constantly chase that, no matter how many problems they cause. Like that's what you first fell in love with, and even if you don't even realize that, that's kind of like, oh, why am I always attracted to the wrong guys? Um, but it's like your first long-term relationship, your first love, and it's like you're just gravitating towards that. But sometimes it's just good to step back, or maybe someone close to you can chime in and be like, well, your past three relationships are kind of the same type of person, and that's the value I see in it in writing is, let's educate and design a man, design a woman, but let's also educate in personality types. They're not as complicated as people would think if you simplify it. And that's always my goal, just dumb it down, simplify the personality types. But there's enough characteristics in each personality type where you can get in the weeds. It can get confusing with it. But
I
as
remember, I remember distinctly sitting in that call center, and one of the people that used to sit next to me, it was a female. And, she would say to me, well, Deborah, I always like the bad boys. And I'm like, why would you make it hard on yourself? Because if he's bad to other people, he's going to be bad to you, right? I mean, does that seem like common sense or no?
Yeah, that's one thing I would say to that is, like, I think there's just a good amount of women out there like, well, and there's a small section of this book about that too. Well, he'll change for me. It's going to be different for me. And in this section, I talk about, I'm sure, whoever is reading the book, whatever female is reading this book for single women, I'm sure you're great. I'm sure you're beautiful on the outside. I'm sure you're beautiful on the inside. I'm sure everything is great about you, but you're not going to change them. And that's just,
Right, right.
it's just a fact of the matter. Like down the road, maybe they will change, maybe they won't, but how long of a chapter, how many years are you going to waste on that? So, and really probably getting a little ahead of ourselves, but that's a big goal of this book is like, how to identify that in the early stages of dating and filtering out those players, or maybe they're not a player and it's just the wrong guy. They're at the wrong stage of their life. Just know what stage you're at and how to identify that early if you're looking for, a serious long-term relationship.
And Chris, I think that is the key point of everything about knowing what you don't want, right? Because look, it took a doctor-ish major and being locked up in a house in Bel Air with my ex-husband and several other people going through a lot of traumatic things in my life, right? Because when you hook up with the wrong person and you're trying to pull them alongside of you to try to make them better or make them happy or make them functioning, okay, whatever word you want to put on it, it's exhausting. And while you're busy running backwards and pulling those people up to be alongside you, just think there's somebody out there that you don't have to pull along. There's somebody out there that could be dancing on the floor with you, singing with you, and happy, and can really make your life 180% better. Don't you think so?
Yeah, and I could even replace the word better with positive, I mean, but not much is sucked out of you. Even if the person you're talking about isn't necessarily a negative person, but it's just they're sucking a lot of energy out of you. What goal or dream did you miss out on? What path did you miss out on because you weren't focused enough looking forward on you? Or maybe it was a promotion at your job, and you were distracted. The individual, I don't know if you say Deb, the individual was distracted,
Yeah.
and they missed out on some promotions or some opportunities, or just in general, I missed out on a goal, a dream, a path that they would have noticed. And maybe it's something they noticed 10 years later, like, well, I would have noticed that had I not had my energy sucked away, with the wrong person.
I could have, here's the thing that I hear people say. I wish I would have, I could have been this, I could have done that. And then I think one day I walked into a room and a dear, dear friend of mine who is creatively amazing, does all this woodworking. And he looked at me out of the sincerity of his heart. And as a dear friend, he said, now, Debra, just think if you and your ex-husband would have been on the same page, what you could have achieved in this world. Right?
That's a profound statement too. That's spot on. Yeah.
So I think when we're talking about your book and we're talking about, knowing what to look for that you don't want, right?
Yeah.
That saves you so much time, so much effort. And here's the thing. Nobody, I don't care if you're heterosexual, LGBTQ plus, whatever, nobody should ever feel like that they have to go out with somebody or have to date somebody that does not bring out the very best in them. Why? Because they're worth it. Love the song I played at the beginning here, my song called In Love with Me. You have to be in love with yourself. Otherwise, how are you going to know love when you find it in another person, right?
Yeah, exactly. And maybe even just remember the phrase, whether it's date or have relationships, date your level and above, have a relationship with your level and above. But like, if you're not secure and confident and know how beautiful you are on the inside, when talking about women, like maybe your bar, people see you as here, but your bar is really a lot lower. So yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to nobody has to date beneath themselves, nor marry beneath themselves. And if you're stuck in that kind of a world, I don't care who you are, I don't care how old you are, you need to get out of it. You need to go where you can be fully who you were created to be, right? I don't care if you're into art or you're into dance or whatever. If you're with somebody who takes your dreams and your hopes and just shoves them down to the floor and squashes them, that's really sad.
Yep. Well, and even just remember, people need to remember, you're always a product of your association too. And sometimes it can be even as simple as you have so many groups of friends, or your group is so large, like you have 20 groups within that main nucleus of group of friends, and let's say maybe 90-95% of them, or 80%, whatever it might be, is just like toxic. They don't make you feel great about yourself, and that's when what easier said than done, but that's when you might just want to step away and just have a small group of friends. Somebody's going to appreciate you, build you up, and that's actually going to help your self-worth. That's going to help you more than having 50, 60 friends, just to say, oh, we go out and have a blast. If they're making you feel worse about yourself or trying to bring you down to their level, that's the old story, two crabs in a bucket. So there was two crabs stuck in a bucket, and one started crawling out, the other one just grabbed him back down. The other one tried to crawl up, grab it back down. So sometimes, whether it be misery loves company, or whether it just be people trying to like just bring you down, if your circle of friends is that big, sometimes it's better to just have a smaller circle, if that's going to be better for your self-worth, your confidence, knowing what you have on the inside.
Right. And if you're the one in the room, and let's just theoretically talk that you're standing in this room and imagine all your friends in there, right? And your loved ones, because let's be honest, I'm going to put myself out there. Sometimes our loved ones really don't love us. So, and this is the sad thing, your family can be your worst critic, and a lot of them can be your worst enemies. So,
Oh, and I'm sure when you say that, plenty of people can relate to that too. I don't think it's just a very small percentage. So,
and I think if you're stuck in a room like that, just walk in that room with me right now. If you can see yourself in that room and you're looking around and there's nobody in that room that you feel like you can confide in, that you can commiserate with, or you can share your hopes and dreams and maybe go work on things together. I don't care. Maybe you just like to antique, and maybe you like to buy and sell. Maybe you're an artist, or maybe you're a singer. But if you're the only one in the room that believes in you, and then you feel bad about yourself, you need to change the room. You need to walk out of that room, is basically what you're saying, and walk in, find a new door, and open that door and see if that room has the right kind of people in it, right?
I like it. I agree 100%. Yeah. And just even if you gotta simplify it for yourself, just remember you will always be a product of your association. So I talk a lot about that in this book for single women too. And it's, and sometimes if it's like, I just attract a woman might say, oh, I just attract the wrong guys. It's just always been like that. And it might be as simple as you always meet a guy through your groups of friends, and it's just not the right association.
Yep. And sometimes
Product of your environment. So.
the best thing you can do is either change where you live, like a lot of people, when they graduate from school, they move to a bigger city, or they move someplace where they feel more comfortable with their job choice or whatever. Or you may just want to change the friends. You may not need to change where you live. You just need to change who your friends are. And there's nothing wrong with upward mobility in friends, right?
Agree 100%. Yeah.
And now I don't want to put this in a context where people think, oh, well, you're just a ladder climber, a brown noser, or you step on anybody like the crab in the bucket, right? Just trying to climb up. No, we're not talking about using people. We're talking about being around like-minded people. And there's a big difference in like-mindedness versus using another person. A like-minded person think of them as a mentor and think of them as somebody that you can actually sit down and have a really exciting conversation with, right? So tell me how, if I go out on a date with somebody, what's a big, like, what are your top 3 warning signs that you would tell people about?
Yeah, so one thing for sure, I would never recommend that a woman gets picked up for a first date. So definitely the first couple of dates, you should be meeting that person.
In a
Yeah,
public, right?
yeah, in a public place, and a lot of people just do, you know, like coffee or something small for a first date anyway. And I think that's smart, just to kind of fill it out. You know, trust your gut at the end of the day, but fill it out. And I think coffee is perfect, or lunch, but I think coffee is perfect. And then, I mean, you shouldn't be giving out your last name, or definitely not your address. But you know, sometimes when people are chatting, whether it be on a first date or chatting on an app leading up to that first date, you know, what part of such and such city do you live in? I mean, it could be, you don't have to tell them, it could be vague, but yeah, you definitely shouldn't be like, oh yeah, you know, I live on half a fourth a block from 108th and Dodge. Like that's like, you don't know enough about them. There's too many predators out there. And I'm sure most aren't on the apps on the dating site, but you never know. Like
Yeah.
things happen, and you shouldn't be giving your last name or address out any more than you shouldn't be giving your social security number out.
Yeah. And
Or
listen, there's a lot of scammers out there. And if somebody, to me, if somebody's going to start out, well, what do you do for a living? Now, I know that sounds like kind of a icebreaker, right? Like a lot of people in our culture talk like that, but I immediately don't want to talk about what I do for a living. I don't want to talk about like, well, what kind of job do you have? What kind of income do you make? What kind of car do you drive? You know, when people start with that kind of stuff with me, I'm like, yeah, I'm in the wrong room, right? And I start feeling like I can't breathe. And I know instantly, like, that's why it's good to have coffee, because that's going to go nowhere, right?
right, yeah. And at your first meet and greet, I mean, it doesn't need to be 2 hours. You know what I mean? Like you're just trying to fill the other person out. Um, and and that's just kind of you're filling them out.
And you got to make sure that when you get up and you leave, that they're not trying to follow you.
Yeah.
I had one situation, just so people know what not to do. I had one situation where this person, after talking for quite a while online, right? Invited me for dinner at a restaurant. Well, it was not too far from my house, and it had a parking garage. And so I took my car and I put it up in the parking garage in a section where I knew nobody could see it. Nobody could judge me because I drove a certain make and model of car, right?
Mhm.
Nobody could like size up my wallet that way. So then I went into the restaurant, and the waiter came over and he said, you know, what can I get for you? And I said, oh, well, I'm expecting someone. He'll be here in a minute. So as soon as the guy got to the restaurant, sit down at the table, and we started looking at the menu, he very clearly was not happy with the prices on the menu. And you could see him sort of beginning to sweat, and he was twitching and fidgeting with his collar. And then he was like going like this with his neck. And so the waiter comes over and he goes, oh, what can I get for you? Are you ready to order? And I go, definitely. And right in front of the waiter, the guy goes, it'll be separate checks. And I just thought to myself, This dude invites me out for dinner, right? I didn't invite him. There was no discussion. Let's go Dutch. You know what I'm saying? He
Yeah.
invited me. So we sit there and I thought to myself, hey, I went through all the trouble of getting ready and coming out here. So screw it. I'm gonna have a nice dinner. I'm paying for it, so I'm gonna buy what I want, right? So I did. And the waiter was profoundly provoked by this man. He did not like him. Now, it's bad when the waiter looks at someone and doesn't like him, right? Because his tip, is all about that.
Right.
So what was hilarious about the whole thing, I ordered a nice dinner. This guy ordered barely get by, almost just a leaf to eat. And then when we get all done, he said, well, I'll walk you to your car. I go, no, this is fine right here. Yeah, we're going to stop right here. Well, can I see you again? I go, no, I just don't think that's a good idea. Now, I felt bad. I felt awkward. I just felt like the whole thing, I just wanted to run out of there with guns blazing because it was like a creep fest. But, even though it was that, I was already there. I had invested time and effort getting there and dressing up. And I thought, fuck it, I'm just going to go for it, right? I'm just going to have myself an evening and eat. And I'll just try to pretend I'm sitting on an airplane and I can't move this guy. So that's what I did. But he tried his darndest to walk me to my car and he tried his darndest to see me. And I just told him 3-4 times no. And then I made an excuse that I had to go back into the building to go to the restroom. And by the time I got out, he was gone. I waited a good long minute,
Good.
So what's the worst experience you've ever had on a first meet and greet or date?
Gosh, I gotta think about that one for a minute. So I'm just trying to think of like one first date that never had I just haven't had a lot that weren't like second dates.
Or maybe the worst conversation you had that scared you so bad you were like, yeah, I'm never going to go out with that person. So, because that happens too. And I think you analyze a lot of stuff more closely than most people do. So I think you would pick up on nuances that a lot of people don't.
I would say mine would probably be so it was like a first and last date. And it was through an app, and there was like phone conversation before the app, like after messaging on the app before the date. I mean, so there was a phone conversation before the date. So I just kind of did a regular dinner. I wasn't really, but again, at this time, I'm newer to the app, so I'm not overthinking it, I guess. Like, oh yeah, when I go dinner, oh great,
Yeah.
And most of the dinner was, you could just tell there was a lot of like violence and drama in this person's life.
Oh my goodness.
But it wasn't like, because you can't really judge somebody if like they're in an abusive relationship. It was just one relationship, but it was just like, every brother, sister, cousin, you could just tell like they're the same way. Like they were violent too. Like you could just pick up on it.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, like I was less assertive in that chapter of my life. And like I wouldn't just cut the date off.
Yeah.
So it was like hour and 55 minutes later. It was a long time. It was like close to 2 hours. We wrapped that date out, and I was like, oh yeah, I gotta use the restroom. And instead of walking out the door to finish the date,
Right.
I was like, oh yeah, use the restroom. Okay, well, give me a call. And then she had messaged me later and was like, oh, it's too bad you didn't walk out. I wanted to show you a good night. I was just like, that's why.
Lord.
So I guess there was that one, but yeah, I haven't had a lot of just one dates, I guess, but yeah.
The restroom's always the great escape for me. It's like,
It worked though. They didn't linger around, and like it worked. They left by the time I got out there, and It worked out for me.
So if somebody was interested in your book, if they wanted to buy it or they wanted to get a copy of your book, how would they do that?
Yep. So a few different ways. Through my webpage, there's a buy now link that's connected to Barnes and Nobles, or you can just go straight to Barnes and Nobles. Confusing Lust with Love is the name of the book, and my name is Chris Hayes. You can also go on
Hayes,
to
and Hayes is spelled Hayes.
Yep. Yep. So and you can, I would say my book is easiest to get on Barnes and Nobles. But you can get on Amazon.com as well. You can just go straight to my webpage, make it easier to remember, www.relationshipswriter.com. Relationships is plural.
Okay, very good. And then when people look at the link on either YouTube or Spotify, I will have that down at the bottom. So if they want to go to your website, they can do that. Now, let's say somebody wanted to get an autograph copy. Is that possible?
Most definitely. Yes.
And they can contact you through your website to do that. Is that true?
Don't have a contact page. So
So go through your email.
so they could just shoot me an email for sure.
Okay, and then I will put the email contact on there. But for those of you with a really great memory, and hopefully you're not driving behind the wheel right now and you can write this down somewhere, it's relationships with an S, right? Relationships writer, WRITER, and then the number 35 at gmail.com. And then Chris will respond to you.
Perfect. Yep, that is correct.
Now, we just have a few minutes left here. So tell me, in your opinion, what is the most advantageous thing of the book that if people were just going to open it up and read a chapter, do you have a favorite chapter that really speaks to you in the book that you think might change a person's life or their perspective and might save them a lot of trouble?
Yeah, there's so many good sections. That's always a tough one. Think about that for a minute. You know, I would say it's gonna be what motivates, demotivates, design a man, design a woman. So there'll be a section on design a man, design a woman. And I think that and personalities is gonna be the most captivating sections of the book. Like and that's kind of how I look at it too. Like if someone isn't going to be an avid reader and read a bunch of relationship books, like that was kind of the goal of my book. Instead of the focus on one theme, like design a man, design a woman, mechanics in the relationships, or love languages or personalities. So for me, instead of just focusing on one, I was touching a little bit on multiple areas. So if somebody were just only read one book, they're not gonna like read dozens of books on drilling down to the different topics. Just one book. My book will touch a little bit on multiple topics, and to me, that's going to be more beneficial, helping you shorten that journey to finding a quality compatible relationship versus having to read dozens of books. I still recommend, read a lot of relationship books. You'll learn a lot, but because that's my ultimate goal, is to help single women identify when it's the wrong guy, filter out those wrong guys, filter out those players. But on the same note, it's a book about like when you find that relationship, the mechanics to have a balanced relationship and a happy, healthy relationship. So it's post journey to find the one that's more compatible for you in the relationship, falling in love, and then staying in love. So,
and a lot of people I think a lot of people at least in the United States, right? Because we're very kind of, everything has to be so quick, easy. We try to break it down to a formula. It's like we're going through the drive-through window and we use microwaves, and we just can't stand it when the internet is slower than 20, 30 megabits. We got to have terabytes now. So it's
Very true.
really something to be in a long-term relationship and keep it fresh and keep the spice and keep that going. And to me, there's no greater love that I've ever seen in my life than if I go somewhere and I see an older couple actually enjoying each other instead of ignoring each other, right?
Yeah. And
Like,
holding each other's hand.
yeah,
Yeah. That's kind of when you're like, you almost know how their dinner conversation goes. Like, are they opening the doors? Are they holding each other's hand? Because, if you're together, like since you're 18, 20, 25, 30, whatever the case might be, and you're, let's say you're 80 to 95, somewhere in there, like that's a long time. So if they're holding hands and holding doors, like they're doing something right.
right. And you know what else it shows me is that they respect each other.
Yeah, that's a few notes I made for myself because before this podcast, like, 'cause for me, like, there's just so many components of design a man, design a woman, relationship mechanics. So like sometimes when you write a book on that, like it's kind of hard just to pick a couple, but balance and respect was two things that I kind of made a note on. Like if I were to pick two, as far as like mechanics of relationship that are most important, I think it would be balance and respect.
So
Or
I did the love language test,
okay,
and I would like to say that I was surprised, but I wasn't.
okay,
I guess what it helped me do was put into words what I always felt on the inside. And sometimes that's what we need. We need a book that'll help us be able to say what it is we need and how to put that into words, because we don't know, because we tend not to sit down and think that we're worth the time and the effort, but we really are. And let me tell you, my number one love language is I got to be respected.
yeah,
I can't stand it if you can't just give me some common decent courtesy,
right.
and I can't stand liars, I got to know the truth, and I got to know that you're going to tell me respectfully what the truth is, and then you can tell me anything.
Yep. It's funny in the section of respect that and really throughout both books that I wrote, because that second one won't quite be done until the end of March, but when talking about respect, how I started off was like, what's the opposite of respect? And I think sometimes that's kind of how you got to go about it. Like a healthy relationship, sometimes you got to be like, well, here's what I don't want. Okay, well, it's the opposite of that,
Ah,
and that's kind of how I started off and referenced respect throughout my book was, well, the opposite of respect is, 6, 7, 8 things. And sometimes that's just how as humans we got to see it, male or female. Like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That is the opposite of respect. Okay, now I know what to remind myself when I should be getting in a relationship.
yeah. And the one thing that I have found, I guess, really kind of offensive in some of these other books that I've read. Definitely, I don't like, especially in the Christian world. I mean, there's a lot of authors that say, oh, well, men have to have respect. Men have to know that you respect what they do, and then you have to honor them. Well, you know what? So do women.
Two-way street. Oh, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I am, as far as I know, that made me feel weird. It's like, well, what am I, more male than female? I mean, I just started like going, what are they saying here? But I think mutual respect in a relationship is really very important.
Oh, huge. Trying to think what that saying is. Because it's taught a lot in Christianity with women, but it's similar to respect. But can't think of it right now. That's okay though. But very similar to respect that, like, what you just said, like women are taught, like you gotta respect the man, and respect and honor are two big,
Yeah.
motivators for man's design, but it's also a two-way street. Like you got to do it on sides. Both parties should be doing it, not just one, or that's not going to work. That's never going to work.
And it's like it was always painted that,
Right. So a woman is taught, especially in the Christian environments, you need to be in submission with your husband, which is totally true. But the part that kind of gets cut off and left hanging is a man should be in submission with a woman too. It's a different type.
correct. And I don't even think submission is really the right word. I think it's you should respect each other.
Yeah.
Honor each other and honor the opinion. So like if there's a disagreement, okay, have a process where you can sit down and work through how to come to a decision together. We just don't have a knockdown, drag out, Hatfield and McCoy situation, right? I mean, I grew up in an Italian family, and on that side, the way they came to resolution was a nightmare. Okay. Well, you don't like it, would just shoot you. Okay. Then I go over to my Danish grandparents, right? And they just yelled at each other. And it just seemed like the person who yelled the most could argue the worst won.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, that's not good.
Well, as far as, in my opinion, like one quick tip for people in relationships, like to kind of not go down that path of blowouts, is like if something is gonna get that, you can tell it's gonna get that heated, and you guys are two people on the opposite spectrums of like what their perception and opinion is. It's just you don't agree. You gotta explain why, but at the end of it, you're not gonna agree. It's just gonna be one of those things to agree to disagree. But before having a blowout, or to avoid this blowout, just go to separate rooms for 15 minutes and write it down. Like it sounds so grade school and corny, but like, because sometimes we just blow our tops and the stuff comes out that we don't mean to come out, and it's just because you're frustrated. So if you had 15 minutes of vent, write it down, process it yourself, it would be a more mature conversation.
And I think the other thing to go along with that is when you give yourself that breath, take a beat and breathe. Okay. You separate the issue from the person. You're not attacking the person. You're working on how to resolve an issue or a process, right?
Love it. Yep.
And then, the very first thing I always say to my husband is, David, I love you and I care very much for you. So that he feels safe, right? But then I got to say, but I got to be honest with you, because I can't lie about this.
Mm-hmm.
The way you drink your coffee or whatever it is, right?
Right.
It just really kind of, it grates on my nerves. So could you just try maybe this or that, or, could we do something different there?
Well, no, but that's better than you letting it fester and you blowing up one day about something little, like I'm trying to think, like a pillow out of place or something, and then a week of, not that you guys would argue for a week, but a week of arguing later, you both find out, oh yeah, nothing to do with the pillow or the sheets or the couch. It was that damn coffee, and I should have just told you in the first place. What bugged me, but to piggyback what you were saying earlier on, we were talking about like if there was a dispute, taking a beat, taking a breath, you still got to discuss it and go over it. And you're either looking for a solution or a kind of a meet in the middle, depending on
you got to have a
common ground.
And to me, the common ground always has to be right here in the middle, and it has to be, I love you. I feel safe in this relationship. I value you.
So that's what I want to piggyback on. So picture, I think people need to realize is like once you say those negative words, like if you didn't take the route we were talking about and just kind of had a blowout argument, well, you this, you that, and like all this stuff just comes out. One thing people need to remember is picture a bucket of oil. And once you say words to somebody's subconscious, there's no way that'll ever get deleted. Like right. No psychologist, no best friend, no going to the gym. Like it'll always be there. So whether in a situation where once you say those words and they're out there, you're definitely going to have to put a lot more effort with words of affirmation, which is good. You definitely want to use as much words of affirmation, which will be your water, that will dilute that bucket of oil, and the oil is the negative. Whether it was words you said in an argument like that, you'll never be able to take it back, get rid of them, but you can dilute them. Or whether it's just negative they have in their life or they had in their past relationship or family, words of affirmation, water, let's dilute that negative, let's dilute that negative. So that's kind of one of my favorite analogies when you get into like, whether it be arguments or just regular words of affirmation. You know, you should be building your partner up. But that made me think of that.
And I agree. And I never got that growing up in the household I grew up in, right? It was either who could argue and scream the loudest or who's going to whip out some kind of a, some kind of a retaliatory action, right? So I think the number one thing I learned was to separate the person from the situation and always remember that people are the valuable asset. That's why it's so important to find the right person so that you can honestly look at that person and love them. Because if you don't, all you're going to do is go in this downward spiral, round and round the same mountain, and everything that the devil plays in your head is like, you could be sound asleep and what do you hear? You hear the negative voice. You hear the negative response, right? Yeah. And so it only gets worse from there. So I totally enjoyed having you on the show today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate that.
And let me ask you this. Would it be possible if one of my fans wanted to get a copy of your book for listening to the podcast, and if they wrote to me, either on my YouTube channel or on my Spotify, would you give one of our lucky listeners a free autographed copy of your book?
Of course.
Awesome.
Definitely.
You're so generous. I really appreciate that. And it's good to see you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. So we will talk again, but hopefully it'll be very soon and not 10 years from now.
Right.
But
definitely.
Hopefully as soon as your new book is out and about, we can interview you about that. Yeah,
because that's for single men. So I will definitely would be honored to come back and have that. If I could just show the cover of the book and just a reminder of the title of the book, that would be great.
Let's do it. Let's put up your book again so everybody can see it. And say it.
Confusing Lust with Love, book for single women on their journey to finding a relationship. But yeah, title of the book is Confusing Lust with Love.
Thank you so much, Chris. And you have a great day.
Thank you. Have a great week.
Don't care what they say about me. Bad vibes, I don't need your company, no.